In the frozen expanse of the Northern Territories, hierarchy is everything. Omegas bow, and Alphas rule. But on a Tuesday night that defied every law of the Obsidian Pack, the natural order shattered. Genevieve Laurent, a destitute Omega, found more than a lost child in the blizzard. She found a death sentence. The moment the infant touched her skin, the impossible happened. The Alpha King's personal crest burned itself onto her wrist. She wasn't his mate. She wasn't royalty. She was a nobody, holding the most powerful secret in the kingdom. How did a crying baby rewrite the fate of the Alpha King, and why was the Queen willing to kill them both to keep it quiet? This is the story of the Frozen Mark. The wind inside the silverpine forest didn't just blow, it hunted. It tore through the thin woolen coat of Genevieve Laurent, biting at her exposed skin like invisible teeth. At 22, Genevieve knew the rules of survival in the outskirts of the Alpha King's territory. Keep your head down, keep your scent masked, and never, ever get caught near the border after sundown. But hunger was a cruel master. The bakery where she scrubbed floors had closed early due to the storm denying her the stale crusts usually left by the back door. She had ventured into the woods, hoping to find winter berries, or perhaps a trapped rabbit. Instead, she found silence. A heavy, unnatural silence. Then a sound cut through the howling gale. It wasn't the chitter of a squirrel or the howl of a timber wolf. It was a high-pitched, rhythmic wail. Genevieve froze. Her Omega instincts, usually dormant and suppressed by years of hardship, flared with a sudden violent intensity. She pushed through a dense thicket of pine, the snow crunching loudly under her worn boots. There, nestled in the hollow of a dead oak tree, wrapped in nothing but a tattered grey blanket, was a baby. The child was turning blue. The snow had already begun to pile over the small bundle. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Genevieve's chest. She dropped to her knees, scooping the bundle up. The infant was barely breathing, his skin ice-cold. Hey, stay with me," Genevieve whispered, her voice trembling as she ripped open her coat and pressed the freezing child against the warmth of her chest. The reaction was instantaneous. The moment the baby's skin touched the bare flesh of her collarbone, a shockwave of energy blasted through Genevieve. It wasn't just static electricity. It felt like a lightning strike hitting her bloodstream. The baby gasped, his eyes flying open. Eyes of piercing, unnatural violet. The infant's tiny hand reached up, gripping Genevieve's left wrist with a strength that shouldn't have been possible for a newborn. "Ah!" Genevieve cried out, falling back into the snow. Her wrist burned. It felt as if someone were pressing a branding iron directly into her veins. She clawed at the snow, gritting her teeth against the agony. A golden light pulsed beneath the baby's hand, searing the fabric of reality around them. As the light faded, the pain subsided into a dull, throbbing ache. Genevieve pulled the baby's hand away, terrified. On the pale skin of her inner wrist, where there had been nothing but a faint freckle. Seconds ago, a mark now glowed in angry crimson. It was intricate, terrifyingly detailed, a double-headed wolf crowned with obsidian shards. Genevieve stopped breathing. She knew that crest. Every wolf in the continent knew that crest. It was the royal sigil of Ronan Valerius, the Alpha King, the Wolf of Winter. It was a mark reserved for the royal family, usually appearing only on the king's mate or his direct bloodline. But Genevieve was neither. She was an Omega from the slums. The baby cooed, the blue tint fading from his skin, replaced by a rosy, healthy flush. He snuggled into her, as if he belonged there, as if he had chosen her. Before Genevieve could process the impossible reality of what had just happened, the ground shook. Thundering paws echoed against the frozen earth. Lights cut through the trees. Flashlights. "Over there, I smell the blood," a rough voice shouted. Genevieve scrambled to her feet, clutching the baby tight. She turned to run, but she was surrounded. 5 massive wolves, their fur matted with snow and armor plating, circled her. They shifted in a blur of bone and muscle, transforming into imposing men in the dark grey tactical gear of the King's Guard. The leader, a scarred man named Kael. She recognized him from the public executions in the square, stepped forward. His gun was raised. "Drop the bundle, Omega," Kael barked, his voice dripping with alpha command. "He was freezing," Genevieve stammered, backing against the tree. "I found him. He was dying." "I said drop it," Kael roared. The baby let out a sharp cry. At that sound, the mark on Genevieve's wrist pulsed again, sending a visible ripple of golden energy outward. The guards flinched, their wolves whimpering inside their minds. Kael's eyes widened as he saw the glow emanating from her wrist. He lowered his weapon, his face draining of color. "The King's mark," he whispered, horror dawning on his face. He looked from the Omega to the baby, then back to the Omega. "Secure her. Do not touch the child. We take them to the Citadel immediately." "Wait, I didn't do anything," Genevieve pleaded as 2 guards grabbed her arms. "You are in possession of the lost prince," Kael spat, his eyes narrowing, "and you bear a mark that effectively makes you a ghost. If the king doesn't kill you tonight, the queen-elect certainly will." The citadel of the Obsidian Pack was not a castle. It was a fortress carved from the side of a black mountain. The throne room was a cavernous hall of polished stone and ice lit by massive iron chandeliers holding thousands of candles. Genevieve was thrown to the floor. The cold stone bit into her knees. The baby had been taken from her arms at the gates, and the separation caused a physical ache in her chest, a phantom pain where the child had rested. "Rise," a voice commanded. It was low, smooth, and terrified her to her core. Genevieve looked up. Sitting on the throne of antlers was Ronan Valerius. He was larger than life, his presence filling the room like a suffocating smoke. He had dark hair that fell over his eyes, a sharp jawline covered in a day's stubble, and eyes like shattered glass, cold hard and unyielding. Beside him stood a woman of breathtaking, lethal beauty. Lydia Dubois, the daughter of the Southern Alpha and Ronan's intended queen. Her blonde hair was perfect, her red dress slashed high up the thigh. She looked at Genevieve as one might look at a cockroach on a dinner plate. "Is this the mongrel who stole the heir?" Lydia asked, her voice shrill with feigned concern. "I didn't steal him," Genevieve said, her voice shaking but clear. "I found him in the snow. He was dying." "Lies," Lydia hissed. "The child was taken from his crib 3 days ago. You kidnapped him to ransom him back. Didn't you, rat?" "Enough," Ronan said. He didn't shout, but the room fell instantly silent. Ronan stood up and descended the stairs. He moved with the predatory grace of an apex predator. He stopped inches from Genevieve. He smelled of pine rain and old blood. "Kael tells me something interesting," Ronan said softly. "He says the boy reacted to you." "He grabbed me," Genevieve whispered, afraid to look him in the eye. Show me your wrist. Genevieve hesitated. A guard roughly yanked her left arm forward, ripping the sleeve of her coat further. The court gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. The mark was glowing faintly, the red ink stark against her pale skin. Ronan stared at it. His expression didn't change, but his pupils dilated, his wolf surfacing. He reached out, tracing the mark with a calloused thumb. Sparks flew. Literal sparks. Genevieve gasped at the sensation. It wasn't pain this time. It was a connection. She felt a wall of emotion slam into her grief exhaustion and a burning, protective fury. It was his emotion. Ronan jerked his hand back as if burned. "Impossible!" Lydia screeched, stepping down from the dais. "She is a witch. She used dark magic to mimic the bond. Kill her, Ronan. Kill her now before she curses us all." Ronan ignored Lydia. He kept his eyes locked on Genevieve. "Who are you?" "Genevieve. Genevieve Laurent. My parents were bakers in Sector 4. They died in the flu outbreak 3 years ago." "An Omega," Ronan mused, "with no lineage, no status." "The baby," Genevieve interrupted, desperate. "Where is he? He was cold. He needs warmth." Just then, the heavy oak doors to the side chamber burst open. An elderly woman, the pack healer, rushed in. She looked frantic. "My king!" "The child," the healer cried. "He will not settle. He is rejecting the wet nurses. His temperature is dropping again. He is screaming for her." The healer pointed a shaking finger at Genevieve. Lydia's face twisted in ugly rage. "Let him scream. He is a prince. He will learn to submit." "He is an infant, Lydia." Ronan snapped his voice, cracking like a whip. He turned back to Genevieve. "Get up." Genevieve scrambled to her feet. "Bring her to the nursery," Ronan commanded the guards. "Ronan," Lydia protested, grabbing his arm. "You cannot be serious. You are letting this trash near your brother's son. She probably orchestrated the kidnapping to play hero." Ronan ripped his arm away from Lydia. "The mark does not lie, Lydia. It has never appeared on anyone outside the bloodline in 500 years. If the boy wants her, he gets her. If she harms a hair on his head, I will tear her throat out myself." He leaned in close to Genevieve, his lips brushing her ear. "You have a temporary reprieve, Omega. Make the boy stop crying, and you live. Fail, and you die." Genevieve was marched out of the throne room, surrounded by guards. As the doors closed, she looked back. She saw Lydia Dubois standing by the throne, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She wasn't just angry. She was calculating. Genevieve realized then that the cold of the snow was nothing compared to the chill of the castle. She had survived the blizzard, but she had walked straight into a viper's nest. Inside the nursery, the screaming was deafening. The baby, the lost prince, was thrashing in a gilded crib. The moment Genevieve walked in, he stopped. She approached the crib. The baby looked at her with those violet eyes, Ronan's eyes. She reached down and he instantly grabbed her finger. The mark on her wrist flared warm and comforting. "Who are you really, little one?" she whispered. "His name is Leo," a deep voice said from the doorway. Ronan was leaning against the frame, watching her. "He is my brother's son. My brother and his mate were killed 3 days ago. We thought Leo died with them." Genevieve's heart broke. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," Ronan said, his voice void of emotion. "Be useful." He walked into the room, closing the door behind him, locking them in. "Now tell me the truth, Genevieve, And think carefully, because I can hear your heartbeat. Did you know my brother? Did he touch you?" "No," Genevieve exclaimed. "I never met him. I'm a nobody." "Then why?" Ronan stepped closer, trapping her against the crib. "Does my family magic think you are his mother?" The nursery was the warmest room in the citadel. Yet, Genevieve felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. For 3 days, she had been a prisoner in luxury. She was fed the finest venison and fresh bread, bathed in scented oils, and dressed in velvet. But the guards at the door never moved. Her entire existence now revolved around Leo. The baby was colossal for his age, already displaying the strength of an alpha. He refused to sleep unless Genevieve was rocking him. The moment she tried to place him in the crib, his wails would shatter the peace, and the mark on her wrist would burn with a sympathetic phantom pain. The door creaked open. Genevieve stiffened, pulling Leo closer to her chest. It was Ronan. But he wasn't alone. Behind him shuffled a woman so old she looked like she was made of dried parchment and spider webs. She wore the robes of the old faith, her eyes milky white with blindness. This was Rowena, the blood witch of the high peaks. "Is this the vessel?" Rowena croaked, her voice sounding like grinding stones. "She is the one the mark chose," Ronan replied, his voice tight. He looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, suggesting the king hadn't slept since the night of the storm. Rowena hobbled forward, sniffing the air. "She smells of rosemary and poverty. But underneath, something ancient." She reached out a withered hand. "Give me your arm, girl." Genevieve hesitated, looking at Ronan. He gave a curt nod. "Do as she says. We need to understand what you are." Genevieve extended her left arm. Rowena gripped her wrist, her cold fingers pressing directly onto the glowing wolf crest. The witch began to chant in a language that made Genevieve's teeth ache. The mark flared violently, illuminating the dim room with crimson light. Leo woke up, watching with wide, curious eyes, silent. Suddenly, Rowena gasped and released Genevieve as if she had been shocked. The witch stumbled back, caught by Ronan. "What is it?" Ronan demanded. "Is she a witch? A shapeshifter?" "No." Rowena wheezed, clutching her chest. "She is a mirror." Ronan frowned. "Speak plainly." "The royal magic of the Valerius line is aggressive," Rowena explained, trembling. "It seeks dominance. When the prince was dying in the snow, his magic reached out for a savior. It didn't look for strength. It looked for emptiness. It looked for a soul so selfless, so devoid of greed, that it could act as a perfect vessel for his protection." Rowena pointed a bony finger at Genevieve. "She has no wolf of her own, my king. Her Omega spirit is so broken and so submissive that the royal magic simply moved in. She is not his mother. She is his living shield. Any harm intended for the boy will pass through her first." Ronan looked at Genevieve with a new expression. It wasn't kindness, but it was an intense, calculating curiosity. "She is a human shield bound by blood, until the boy comes of age," Rowena confirmed, "or until she dies. If she dies, the protection shatters, and the boy is vulnerable again." "Then she stays," Ronan declared, "permanently." The door flew open again. This time, there was no knock. Lydia Dubois strode in, followed by 2 of her handmaidens. She looked immaculate in white furs, a sharp contrast to Genevieve's simple grey dress. "I heard the witch was here," Lydia announced, ignoring Genevieve completely. "What is the verdict, Ronan? Have you found the spell she used to trick you?" "There is no trick, Lydia," Ronan said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning growl rumbling in his chest. "She is bound to Leo. She stays in the royal wing." Lydia's face twitched. For a second, the mask of the composed queen slipped, revealing a snarl of pure jealousy. "In the royal wing, you mean to keep a street rat in the family quarters?" "It is improper, Ronan. The council will not accept it. My father will not accept it." "Your father governs the south." Ronan stepped between Lydia and Genevieve. "I govern the north, and I do not care about propriety. I care about my nephew's life." Lydia laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "You are being sentimental. It's weak, Ronan. But fine. If she is the nursemaid, let her work." Lydia walked over to the table where a silver tray of warm milk bottles sat. She ran a manicured finger over the rim of one. "Make sure she feeds him properly. We wouldn't want the little prince to get an upset stomach." She turned and left her heels clicking like gunshots on the stone floor. Genevieve felt a wave of nausea. The mark on her wrist throbbed a sharp, stinging sensation. "She hates me," Genevieve whispered. "She hates anything she cannot control," Ronan muttered. He turned to leave, escorting the witch out. "Lock the door behind me. Open it for no one but me or Kyle." The heavy door clicked shut. Genevieve was alone again. Leo began to fuss. He was hungry. Genevieve went to the tray and picked up the bottle Lydia had touched. The mark burned. It was a searing heat focused intensely on the side of her wrist. Genevieve dropped the bottle in shock. It shattered on the stone floor. The milk hissed. Genevieve watched in horror as the white liquid bubbled and turned a sickly corrosive green where it touched the stone. It was poisoned, not just spoiled, laced with wolfsbane. If she had given that to Leo, he would have died in agony within seconds. Genevieve backed away, scooping Leo up, trembling violently. The threat wasn't just dislike. Lydia had just tried to assassinate the heir in broad daylight right under the king's nose. Genevieve didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of the room furthest from the door, clutching Leo, a silver letter opener she had stolen from a desk drawer gripped in her hand. When Ronan entered the next morning, he found her bleary-eyed and terrified. He saw the shattered glass and the scorched stain on the floor. He knelt by the stain, sniffing it. His face went terrifyingly blank. The temperature in the room plummeted until Genevieve could see her breath. "Wolfsbane," he said softly. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "She touched it," Genevieve whispered. "Lydia." She touched the bottle. Ronan stood up slowly. "You accuse the future queen of treason. I accuse her of trying to kill a baby." Genevieve snapped, her fear giving way to anger. "Look at the floor, Ronan. If the mark hadn't warned me—" Ronan looked at her, and the ice in his eyes cracked. He believed her. He knew what Lydia was capable of. "Gather your things," he commanded. "Where are we going?" "The nursery is compromised. You are moving to the only room in this fortress that I can completely seal." "Where?" "My bedroom." The walk through the castle was a gauntlet of whispers. Servants stared. Guards averted their eyes. Walking beside the Alpha King, clutching the air, Genevieve felt the weight of 1,000 judgments. Ronan's chambers were vast, dominated by a massive fireplace and a balcony overlooking the frozen valley. He pointed to a plush chaise lounge near the fire. "You sleep there. The crib goes next to the bed." "This is dangerous," Genevieve said, watching him lock the heavy iron bolts on the door. "If Lydia finds out—" "Let her find out," Ronan growled. He began to unbuckle his chest armor, tossing the heavy leather onto a chair. Underneath he wore a simple black linen shirt that clung to his muscular frame. "I am done playing politics. Someone killed my brother Lucian. Someone tried to kill Leo. I will burn this entire kingdom down to find them." He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and offered one to her. Genevieve shook her head. "Lucian." Genevieve tested the name. "What happened to him?" Ronan stared into the fire. He was traveling to the western border for a diplomatic meeting. His convoy was ambushed. It was professional. No survivors. Except Leo, who was somehow thrown clear into the woods. "It wasn't bandits," Genevieve said quietly. "No, it was a coup." Ronan turned to her. "You said you found him in the hollow of an oak tree." "Yes." "Did you find anything else? Anything at all?" Genevieve hesitated. She had been too scared to mention it before, fearing they would think she stole it. "But after the poison, there was a blanket," she said. "But inside the folds pinned to the fabric, there was a note and a ring." Ronan stiffened. "Where are they?" "I hid them in my boot. I was afraid the guards would take them." Genevieve sat Leo down on the soft rug and pulled off her worn leather boot. From the lining, she extracted a crumpled piece of parchment and a heavy silver ring. Ronan took the ring first. His breath hitched. "This is Lucian's signet ring. He never took it off." He unfolded the paper. It was stained with blood and snow, the handwriting hurried and jagged. "Ronan, not the West. It's a trap. The viper is in the bed. Trust no one, but—" The note ended in a smear of blood. "The viper is in the bed," Ronan read aloud, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Lydia," Genevieve whispered. "She sleeps in your bed, or she intends to." Ronan crushed the note in his fist. "The Dubois family has been pushing for this alliance for years. If Lucian were alive, he would have challenged the union. With him dead and Leo presumed dead, I would be forced to marry Lydia to secure the succession." She needed them gone, Genevieve realized. That's why she hates the baby. Leo is the only thing standing between her and the throne. Ronan looked at Genevieve. For the first time, he really saw her. Not as an Omega, not as a tool, but as a woman who had walked into a war zone to save a child she didn't know. He crossed the room, closing the distance between them. The air grew heavy with static. "You kept this safe. You kept him safe." He reached out his hand, brushing her cheek. His skin was rough-hot against the cold of the room. Genevieve's breath hitched. The mark on her wrist hummed a low, pleasant vibration totally different from the warning burn. "I promised I would protect him," she said, breathless. "You are doing a better job than my entire royal guard," Ronan murmured. His gaze dropped to her lips. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the two of them, the Alpha King and the stray Omega. The tension was magnetic, undeniable. Crash! The massive glass doors to the balcony shattered inward. Wind and snow exploded into the room, followed by 3 dark figures swinging in on ropes. They were dressed in white camouflage, their faces masked. Assassins. "Get down!" Ronan roared. He didn't shift, there was no time. He grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and launched himself at the first intruder. The assassin wielded 2 curved daggers. He slashed at Ronan, cutting a line across the king's forearm. Ronan didn't even flinch. He swung the poker with bone-crushing force, connecting with the assassin's skull. The man dropped instantly. Genevieve dove for Leo, curling her body over him on the rug. "The girl!" one of the assassins shouted. "Kill the girl!" The remaining 2 bypassed Ronan, sprinting toward Genevieve. Ronan let out a roar, that shook the stone walls, a feral half-shifted sound. He lunged, tackling one attacker, his claws extending from his fingertips, tearing through the man's tactical gear. But the third assassin was fast. He reached Genevieve. He raised a sword, aiming for her back. Genevieve squeezed her eyes shut, shielding Leo. Clang! The sword didn't hit flesh. It hit a barrier of golden light. Genevieve looked up. The mark on her wrist was blindingly bright. A translucent golden dome had erupted from her skin, covering her and the baby. The assassin's sword bounced off it, vibrating with the impact. The assassin stared, stunned. Sorcery! Before he could strike again, a hand grabbed his neck from behind. Ronan was there. His eyes were fully black, the eyes of the wolf. He didn't speak. He simply squeezed. There was a sickening crunch, and the assassin went limp. Ronan threw the body aside and fell to his knees beside the golden barrier. He was bleeding from his arm and a cut on his cheek, his chest heaving. He placed his bloody hand against the golden light. Genevieve. The barrier dissolved instantly at his touch. Genevieve was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she was unharmed. Leo was wailing beneath her. Ronan pulled them both into his arms. He buried his face in Genevieve's neck, inhaling her scent, grounding himself. The violence of the fight was still humming in his blood, but the sight of her alive calmed the beast. They came into my room. Ronan whispered into her hair, his voice thick with a deadly promise. They came for my mate. Genevieve froze. What? Ronan pulled back slightly, looking at her with intensity that scorched her soul. He hadn't meant to say it, but in the adrenaline of the moment the truth had slipped out. The mark, Ronan said, his voice rough. It didn't just choose a guardian, Genevieve. It chose the one thing I was missing. Before she could process the confession, the bedroom doors were pounded on from the outside. My king, my king. We heard fighting. It was Kael. Ronan stood up, helping Genevieve to her feet. He wiped the blood from his face, his mask of command sliding back into place. Open the door, Ronan commanded. Kael and a dozen guards rushed in, weapons drawn. They stopped dead when they saw the bodies on the floor. Secure the perimeter, Kael shouted. We have a breach. No. Ronan said, his voice cold as the grave. We don't have a breach, Kael. We have a purge. He pointed to the dead assassin nearest the balcony. Check his wrist. Kael knelt and pulled back the assassin's sleeve. There, tattooed on the inside of the wrist, was a symbol, a serpent coiled around a rose. The room went silent. It was the crest of the Dubois family, Lydia's personal guard. Arrest her, Ronan said. Arrest Lydia. Arrest her father. Arrest anyone who bears this mark. Sire. Kael hesitated, pale. This means war with the South. Ronan looked at Genevieve, who was rocking a terrified Leo. He looked at the blood on the floor. Let them come, Ronan snarled. I'll bury them all in the snow. But as the guards turned to leave, a horn blasted from the valley below, a deep, mournful sound that signaled an approaching army. Genevieve ran to the broken balcony doors. Through the swirling snow she saw torches, thousands of them, marching up the winding road to the citadel. You won't have to wait, Genevieve said, her voice trembling. They're already here. Lydia hadn't just sent assassins. She had brought her father's army. The siege of the Obsidian Pack had begun. The horn blasted again, shaking the dust from the high stone ceilings of the citadel. Below in the valley, the torchlight of the southern army spread like a wildfire across the snow. Ronan stood on the balcony, ignoring the biting wind that whipped his dark hair. He was no longer just a man. He was the general of the north. He turned to Kael. "Bar the main gates, archers to the east wall. They will try to flank us through the frozen ravine." "Sire," Kael said, buckling his helmet, "Thorn Dubois has brought 3,000 wolves. We have 500. "Thorn brought swamp wolves to a blizzard," Ronan said, his voice grim. "Let them freeze. We hold the line." He turned to Genevieve. She was still clutching Leo, her eyes wide with terror, but her jaw set in determination. The transition from destitute Omega to the center of a war had happened too fast. Yet she wasn't crumbling. Ronan grabbed a heavy fur cloak from his wardrobe and wrapped it around her and the baby. He pulled a serrated obsidian dagger from his belt, a weapon of kings, and pressed it into her hand. "Go to the crypts," he commanded. "The lower levels are carved into the mountain's roots. They are bomb-proof." "You're not coming," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I have to hold the wall. If they breach the citadel, they will come for Leo first. And you." He paused, his hand lingering on her shoulder. The heat of his palm seeped through the heavy fur. "Genevieve, if the walls fall, if you feel the mark on your wrist fade—" "Don't," she whispered, grabbing his hand. "Don't say it." "If the mark fades, it means I am dead," Ronan said efficiently. "If that happens, you run. You take the boy and you disappear into the wild. Do not look back." "I won't have to run," Genevieve said, surprising herself with the ferocity in her voice. "Because you aren't going to die. You promised to tear them apart." A ghost of a smile touched Ronan's lips, a rare, dangerous expression. "So I did." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was a chaste kiss, but it burned like a brand. "Go. Now." Guards escorted Genevieve and Leo down the spiraling servant stairs, deep into the belly of the mountain. The air grew stale and cold. The crypts were a vast network of tunnels where the ancestors of the Obsidian Pack were buried. Tonight, they were a shelter for the Pack's most vulnerable, the elderly, the mothers, and the children. As Genevieve entered the main chamber, a hush fell over the huddled crowd. They saw the baby in her arms. They saw the glowing red mark on her wrist. "It's true," an old woman whispered. "The ghost wolf." Genevieve sat on a stone bench near a statue of the first king. She felt like an imposter. These people looked at her with hope, but she was just a baker with a magic trick she didn't understand. Above them, the mountain groaned. Dull thuds echoed through the stone catapults, hitting the outer walls. The siege had begun. Outside on the ramparts, Ronan stood amidst a storm of arrows. The wind howled, carrying the scent of burning pitch and wet fur. "Ronan Valerius!" A magically amplified voice boomed from the darkness below. A figure rode forward on a massive black horse. It was Thorn Dubois, the Alpha of the South. He was a giant of a man, wearing armor made of crocodile hide and steel. "You harbor a fugitive and a thief!" Thorn bellowed, his voice reaching every ear in the citadel. "Surrender the Omega whore who stole my grandson. Surrender the baby you kidnapped after murdering your own brother." A ripple of unease went through Ronan's defenders. Thorn was spinning a narrative to justify his invasion. Ronan stepped onto the parapet. He didn't need magic to amplify his voice. His alpha command carried on the wind. "Your grandson is safe, Thorn safe from the daughter who poisoned his milk," Ronan shouted back. "And as for the Omega, she is under the protection of the King's mark. Step 1 foot closer to these walls and I will hang your hide from the tallest tower." Thorn laughed. "The mark you gave the royal seal to a street rat. You have gone mad with grief, boy. Men of the Obsidian Pack. Your king is unfit. Open the gates, and I will spare you. Fight and you die." "Fire!" Ronan roared. A volley of flaming arrows rained down from the battlements illuminating the night. The battle was joined. 3 hours into the siege, the crypts were suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and fear. The distant booming of the battle had grown louder, closer. Genevieve was rocking Leo, who had finally fallen asleep. Her arm was aching. The mark was pulsing rhythmically, not with pain, but with a strange radar-like sensation. It was thrumming in time with something else. She looked around the dim chamber. Hundreds of eyes watched her, but one pair of eyes felt different. Near the heavy iron doors that sealed the crypts, a guard was pacing. He was a young beta named Amon. Genevieve had noticed him earlier. He kept checking his pocket watch. The thrumming in her wrist grew faster as she looked at him. Danger. The instinct whispered in her mind. It wasn't her thought. It was the mark's warning. Genevieve stood up slowly. "Excuse me," she said to the mother beside her. "Hold him." She passed the sleeping Leo to the woman and walked toward Amon. "Is there news from above?" Genevieve asked, keeping her voice level. Amon jumped. He looked sweaty despite the cold. "No, my lady. No news. Please step back to the safety zone." "You keep checking your watch, Amon," she said, stepping closer. "What are you waiting for?" Amon's hand dropped to the hilt of his sword. "Shift change, that's all." "You're lying," Genevieve said. The mark flared, casting a red glow on Amon's face. "The king ordered a lockdown. There are no shift changes." Amon's face twisted. "You shouldn't have come here, Omega. You messed up the plan." He drew his sword. The crowd screamed. "Open the doors!" Amon shouted to a second guard, a traitor standing by the lever. "Now!" The second guard yanked the lever. The massive gears ground together, and the iron doors began to creep open. "No!" Genevieve screamed. Amon lunged at her. He wasn't trying to kill her. He was trying to capture her. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the bruise from the manacles days ago. "Thorn pays better than Ronan," Amon spat. Genevieve didn't think. She reacted. She didn't have claws, and she didn't have training. But she had the mark. She shoved her left hand, the marked hand, directly into Amon's face. "Let go!" she shrieked. A blast of concussive force exploded from her palm. It wasn't just light this time. It was a physical hammer blow of energy. Amon was thrown backward, flying 10 feet through the air, before smashing into the stone wall. He slumped to the ground unconscious. The crowd gasped. Genevieve stared at her hand, trembling. She had just used the king's magic as a weapon. But it was too late. The doors were open. Through the gap, shadows poured in. Not the army, a strike team. 6 figures, clad in sleek black leather armor, moving with silent, deadly precision. And leading them was Lydia Dubois. She didn't look like a refined lady of the court now. She wore tactical gear, her blonde hair tied back in a severe braid, a cruel curved sword in her hand. "Well done, Amon," Lydia drawled, stepping over the unconscious traitor. "Although you could have been quieter." She scanned the room, her eyes locking instantly on Genevieve. "Hello, rat." Lydia smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Did you think hiding in a hole would save you?" Genevieve backed away toward the woman holding Leo. "Don't touch him." "Oh, I intend to do more than touch him," Lydia said, advancing. The refugees scrambled away, pressing themselves against the back walls, terrified of their future queen. "My father is distracting Ronan at the walls. By the time the king realizes the breach, I will have the heir, and you will be a tragic casualty of the invasion." "You're a monster," Genevieve spat. "He's a baby." "He is a rival," Lydia screamed, losing her composure. "Do you know what it's like to wait 10 years to be queen, to be perfect? And then this thing is born and ruins everything." She raised her sword. "Give me the child, and I will make your death quick." Genevieve snatched Leo back from the terrified woman. She held him tight, retreating until her back hit the stone statue of the first king. There was nowhere left to go. "I said, give him to me!" Lydia lunged. Genevieve curled around the baby, bracing for the strike. She squeezed her eyes shut and screamed, "Ronan!" It was a cry of pure desperation, amplified by the bond of the mark. Far above, on the battlements, Ronan froze. He was in the middle of combat, his sword buried in the chest of a southern soldier. But he heard it. He heard her voice in his head as clearly as if she were standing next to him. "Ronan." His heart stopped. The connection snapped into place, a rigid, unbreakable iron cable linking his soul to hers. "The crypts," he realized, horror washing over him. "They're in the crypts." He turned to Kyle. "Take command. Hold the wall." "Sire, where are you going?" Kyle shouted. Ronan didn't answer. He vaulted over the side of the battlement. It was a 40-foot drop to the inner courtyard. Ronan shifted in midair. His body contorted, bones cracking and reforming, fur bursting from his skin. By the time he hit the cobblestones, he was a massive midnight wolf, easily the size of a draft horse. He roared a sound that shattered windows and sprinted toward the entrance of the crypts. He didn't run like a man. He ran like a force of nature. He tore the heavy wooden doors of the entrance off their hinges with his teeth. Down in the dark, Lydia's sword was inches from Genevieve's neck. The golden shield flared again, stopping the blade. But the shield was flickering weak. Genevieve was exhausted. The magic was draining her life force. "Die, you stubborn wretch!" Lydia shrieked, hacking at the golden light. Clang, 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 the shield shattered. Genevieve gasped as the feedback knocked the wind out of her. She fell, exposing Leo. Lydia raised her sword for the killing blow. A shadow engulfed the room. There was no sound, just a blur of black fur and fury. Ronan launched himself from the shadows of the tunnel, sailing over the heads of the refugees. He hit Lydia with the force of a freight train. Lydia flew across the room, smashing into a pillar with a sickening crunch. Her sword clattered away. Ronan stood over Genevieve, and Leo Hackle's raised teeth bared, dripping with saliva and rage. He let out a snarl that vibrated in the chest of everyone present. It was a primal claim. Mine. Lydia's strike team hesitated. Facing an alpha king in his full wolf form in a confined space was suicide. "Kill it," Lydia wheezed from the floor, clutching her broken ribs. "Kill the wolf." The 5 assassins charged. Ronan didn't retreat. He was a whirlwind of claws and teeth. He tore the throat out of the first attacker, swatted the second one against the wall with a paw, and snapped the spine of the third. It was a massacre. But while Ronan was occupied, Lydia dragged herself up. She pulled a small silver pistol from her boot. It was loaded with bullets, tipped with concentrated wolfsbane ash. She didn't aim at Ronan. She aimed at Genevieve. "If I can't be queen," Lydia whispered, blood bubbling on her lips. No one will. Bang! The shot echoed deafeningly in the stone chamber. Ronan turned his eyes wide, but he was too far away. Genevieve didn't move. She couldn't. She watched the bullet come. But it didn't hit her. At the last second, a small hand reached out from the bundle in her arms. Leo. The baby's eyes glowed with that same violet light. The air in front of Genevieve shimmered and warped. The bullet hit the warped air and stopped. It hung there suspended in zero gravity, spinning harmlessly. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the assassins stopped fighting. Leo cooed, clenched his tiny fist, and the bullet dropped to the floor with a metallic ting. Ronan shifted back to human form, naked and bloodied, his chest heaving. He stared at his nephew. An ancient, Ronan whispered, awe and terror in his voice. He is an ancient. Lydia stared at the baby, her face draining of all color. No, that kind of power. It's a myth. Ronan walked over to Lydia. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like an executioner. He kicked the gun out of her reach. The war is over, Lydia. Ronan said, his voice void of mercy. And you lost. The silence in the crypts was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of the assassins and the soft coos of Leo, who seemed entirely unaware that he had just rewritten the laws of magic. Ronan didn't look at Lydia. He grabbed her by the back of her tactical vest, hauling her to her feet like a discarded doll. She cried out in pain, clutching her broken ribs. But Ronan had no pity left. Move, he growled. Where are you taking me? Lydia sobbed, the arrogance finally beaten out of her. To your father, Ronan said. He turned to Genevieve. Can you walk? Genevieve nodded, clutching Leo tight against her chest. Her legs were shaking and the adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted, but the look in Ronan's eyes gave her strength. It was a look of absolute partnership. They ascended the stairs, a strange procession, the Alpha King, the traitor, the Omega and the ancient child. When they reached the battlements, the fighting had paused. Both sides were exhausted, the snow stained red with the blood of the fallen. The Southern Army was regrouping for a final breach, battering rams poised at the main gate. Ronan dragged Lydia to the edge of the parapet, shoving her forward so the torchlight from below illuminated her face. She looked wrecked, bruised, bloody, and terrified. Thorn. Ronan's voice boomed across the valley, amplified by the Alpha command. Look up! Below atop his black stallion, Thorn. Dubois squinted through the snow. He saw his daughter. He saw the blade of the king at her throat. You coward, Thorn roared. You hide behind a woman. I am returning your trash, Ronan shouted back. She failed Thorn. She failed to kill the heir. She failed to kill the Omega, and she failed to steal the throne. Ronan stepped back, pulling Genevieve forward. Show them, Ronan commanded softly. Genevieve raised Leo high. The baby, sensing the tension, didn't cry. Instead, he released a pulse of that same violet energy. It wasn't an attack this time. It was a wave of pure dominance. It rolled over the battlefield like a physical pressure change. Every wolf in the valley felt it. It was the aura of an ancient, a primal lineage that hadn't been seen since the First Age. It was a power that commanded instinctual submission. The horses of the Southern Army panicked, rearing and bucking. But the wolves went silent. One by one, the Southern soldiers dropped to their knees, not out of choice, but out of biological imperative. They could not stand in the presence of an ancient. Thorn fought it. He gripped his saddle, his face turning purple with the effort to defy the command. "Stand up! Fight! He is a fraud!" "Look at your men, Thorn," Ronan yelled. "They know what you refuse to see. The boy is an ancient. To fight him is to fight the moon goddess herself." Thorn looked around. His army was on its knees in the snow. His daughter was broken on the wall. The coup was over. Thorn slumped in his saddle, the fight leaving him. He dropped his sword into the snow. "It is finished," Ronan declared. "Open the gates. Disarm them." The following morning, the sun broke over the silver pine forest, blindingly bright against the fresh snow. The air was crisp and clean, scrubbing away the scent of smoke and death. The great hall was packed. This time, however, Genevieve didn't kneel. She stood on the dais to the right of the throne of antlers. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue, commissioned by Ronan himself. Leo was asleep in a cradle beside the throne, guarded by Kael, and 4 of the most elite knights. Thorn and Lydia stood in chains before the court. "Thorn Dubois," Ronan spoke, his voice echoing off the stone walls, "for the crime of treason and for launching an unjust war against the crown, you are stripped of your titles. Your lands are forfeit to the crown." "And my life?" Thorn asked, his head bowed. "Death is too easy," Ronan said coldly. "You will be exiled to the grey wastes. You will live out your days hunting for scraps in the permafrost without a pack, without a name." Ronan turned his gaze to Lydia. She was trembling, her eyes darting around the room, finding no sympathy. "And you," Ronan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You tried to murder an infant. You tried to murder the woman under my protection. You poisoned my brother's memory." "I did it for love," Lydia cried out, a last desperate lie. "I loved you, Ronan." "You loved the crown," Ronan corrected. "You will join your father in the wastes. But know this, if you ever step foot south of the ice barrier, the mark on the Omega's wrist will alert me, and I will not be merciful a second time." As the guards dragged the screaming Dubois family away, the court erupted in cheers. It wasn't just a victory, it was a cleansing. Ronan raised a hand for silence. He turned to Genevieve. The room held its breath. "There is one final matter," Ronan said. He stepped off the throne and stood before her. He took her left hand. The mark on her wrist had changed. The angry red welt was gone. In its place was a tattoo of shimmering gold, the double-headed wolf, but now intertwined with vines of silver. "The healers tell me the bond has settled," Ronan said loud enough for the court to hear, but his eyes were locked on hers. "They say the magic chose you as a guardian, that you were a vessel." Genevieve looked down. "I know. I'm just an Omega." "No," Ronan said firmly. "The magic didn't choose you because you were empty, Genevieve. It chose you because you were the only one full enough." He traced the gold lines on her skin. "You ran into a storm to save a stranger. You stood against an army to protect a child who wasn't yours. You have the heart of a queen, Genevieve. The ancient recognized it before I did." Ronan went down on one knee. The entire court gasped. Alphas did not kneel. Certainly not kings, and never to Omegas. "The war is over," Ronan said, looking up at her with raw vulnerability. "But I find I cannot rule this kingdom alone. Not anymore. I need the shield just as much as the boy does." He pulled a ring from his pocket. It wasn't the heavy signet ring of state. It was a band of white gold set with a diamond as clear as ice. "Genevieve Laurent," Ronan asked, "will you do me the honor of being my mate?" Will you help me raise this boy? Will you rule the North by my side? Tears spilled down Genevieve's cheeks. For her entire life, she had been invisible. She had been the dirt on the shoe of the pack. And now the Wolf of Winter was kneeling at her feet. "I have no status," she choked out. "I have nothing to offer you." "You have everything," Ronan countered. "Say yes." Genevieve smiled a radiant, genuine smile that lit up the gloomy hall. "Yes, yes, my king." Ronan slid the ring onto her finger. He stood up and pulled her into a searing kiss. The court erupted into applause wolves howling their approval to the rafters. In the cradle beside them, Leo woke up. He saw the two people who loved him blinking his violet eyes. He gurgled, reaching out a tiny hand. Genevieve broke the kiss and picked him up, sandwiching him between her and Ronan. "He's watching," she whispered, laughing. Ronan looked at his nephew, the future of the wolf kind, and then at his mate. Let him watch. Let him see what a true pack looks like. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and gentle. The storm had broken. The winter was no longer something to fear. It was their home. And for the first time in history, an Omega sat on the throne of antlers, not because she was born to it, but because she had earned it. And that is the legend of Genevieve and the frozen mark. From a destitute outcast shivering in the snow to the Queen of the North, proving that true power doesn't come from your rank, it comes from your heart. What did you think of the twist with baby Leo? Did you expect him to be an ancient? And do you think Ronan gave Lydia a punishment that was too harsh or not harsh enough? Let me know in the comments below. Type Team Genevieve if you loved her bravery. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another werewolf romance saga. I'll see you in the next video. Stay wild.